Thank you very much. I will share my screen.
Okay. Are you able to share the screen?
It's telling me that the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Let me see if I can get you. Uh, I'm making you the host, Jamie,
Okay.
and that should allow you to share your screen. Okay.
Okay. Is everyone able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. You should have a blue screen in front of you that says Clerk of Superior and State Courts. If you do not see a blue screen, please let me know. All right. Looks like everybody's good to go. So it's my pleasure to present this information to you all today. I know I was contacted a couple of months ago uh, and asked to present information, and during COVID and the pandemic and everything going on with the courts, my schedule did not allow to present to you back then, but I'm glad that it worked out for us to do this month. It's my pleasure to present this information to you based on the clerk's office. Many people don't even know what the clerk's office does. Um, when I tell people what my job is in the community, I'm often met with a puzzled look and people turning their head sideways when I tell them that I'm the clerk of Superior Court. Even though people vote for it every 4 years, a lot of times people don't know what it is. So it's my pleasure to always talk about the clerk's office and always give information about what we do. Before I get into the slides, there is a clerk of Superior Court in every single county in Georgia. So out of 159 counties, there are a total of 159 clerk of Superior Courts. I'll get into where state court comes in here shortly, but at any rate, there are 159 of us around the state of Georgia, and the clerk of Superior Court position has been here ever since the state of Georgia was created. But we'll get into that in the additional slides. So as we move forward, I'm going to give you a little bit of history about the office. I'm going to tell you a little bit about where or how the office was derived and essentially what we do in modern day, and then also get into the questions that were submitted to me. They will all be a part of this presentation. Additionally, all of the slides were converted to PDF format, and I emailed those to Mr. Zawadski, and I'm sure he will send those to you via email in your distribution list. So as I get going, I'm just going to keep talking, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to flag me down, or we can do questions at the end, whichever you prefer. I'm in no hurry. I'm all yours for this block. So whatever it is that you want to know, if it's within my scope of knowledge, I'm happy to pass it on to you. So we'll go ahead and get started. So the Clerk of Superior Court is an elected constitutional position. And in each county in Georgia, there are 4 elected constitutional officers, and those are comprised of the sheriff, the probate judge, the tax commissioner, and the clerk of Superior Court. Now, when I say constitutional position, what I'm referring to is these 4 positions are written into the Constitution of Georgia. So ever since the state was created, these positions have existed in every single county in Georgia. Now, the state of Georgia obviously was created well before the county of Rockdale was created. So obviously there was no clerk of Superior Court in this area until Rockdale County was actually created in 1870, but we'll get to that here shortly. Now, there are numerous other elected positions within a county in Georgia, but the elected constitutional officers comprise these 4 positions. So anytime you hear that terminology, constitutional officer, that means that they are actually written into the Constitution. So the governor is a constitutional position, lieutenant governor, and so on. Those are examples. But from a county perspective, these 4 positions are considered constitutional positions. So in summary, Rockdale County was created on October 18th, 1970 by act of the Georgia legislature. So yes, that means Rockdale County, a week from today, as a matter of fact, will celebrate its 150th birthday. There's been a clerk of Superior Court in Rockdale County since the date the county was created. Superior Court is the highest court in the county. So you'll notice that there are various court terminology that you'll hear when you're referring to a courthouse or a court system. And every county is different, but the one thing that is primary is in every county in Georgia, the highest court that conducts business for county business is the Superior Court. So the clerk of Superior Court is a position that is separate and elected from the elected judges and the district attorney and the sheriff and the tax commissioner. It is its own position. So in the eyes of county government, like for example, the Board of Commissioners is duty bound by law to give me a budget every year, but that's the extent of their authority over my office. The clerk of Superior Court, the probate, the probate judge, the sheriff, the tax commissioner, they are all responsible for their own areas and their own elected offices. So once the Board of Commissioners gives the budget, it's essentially up to us to run the offices. There's certain mandated things that they have to provide, like a building to work out of, and some other functions that are required by statute. But in eyes of the office, the person that's elected to the position is in charge of the entire office. So all duties of the Clerk of Superior Court are outlined in the Constitution of the state of Georgia and also Title 15 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated. Now, the Official Code of Georgia Annotated is just a fancy way of saying the law for the state of Georgia. So if anybody ever wants to spend some time reading about the duties of the Clerk of Superior Court, you could Google and do a search on Title 15 for the, it's commonly referred to as OCGA, but the state law, and that lists basically in broad terms all of the duties required of the Clerk of Superior Court. And then of course also the constitutional obligations that are actually written into the Constitution. So the Clerk of Superior Court is the only elected clerk position in Rockdale County. There are other people that have the name clerk in their title in Rockdale County, but they are not elected. The only person in the county that has clerk in their title that is elected is the Clerk of Superior Court. So other examples of clerks that are not elected are the deputy clerks in probate court. The clerk of magistrate court is appointed by the magistrate judge. The clerk of juvenile court is appointed by the juvenile court judge. The clerk of municipal court is appointed by the city council for the city of Conyers. Those are examples of other people in the community that you might hear that have the name clerk in their title, but they are not elected. All of those are appointed either by a judge or they're appointed by some entity such as the city council. So just a little brief history there. So you've often maybe possibly heard the Clerk of Superior Court in Rockdale County often referred to as the Clerk of Superior and State Courts as well. So if you have heard Clerk of Superior and State Courts, keep in mind that the elected position is the Clerk of Superior Court. State Court in Rockdale County did not come about until 1987. The State Court of Rockdale County was created by the Georgia legislature in 1987. The Clerk of State Court is an appointed position and one that has been held by the Superior Court clerk since 1987. So those of you that have been in the community for a while, you know that back in 1987, retired Honorable Joanne Caldwell was the Clerk of Superior Court back at that time. Well, when the state legislature created the state court in Rockdale County, Ms. Caldwell became appointed as the state court clerk. So even though she's elected as Superior Court, if at any time, or I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. She was elected to the Superior Court clerk position in 1985, Well, 2 years later, they created state court in Rockdale County. And once that was created, they needed a clerk to run state court. So she was appointed to that position. She was given slightly a little more extra compensation, and that's written into the law as well. So, so the state court is an additional responsibility on top of the Superior Court clerk responsibilities. So every county in Georgia is different. You may go to one county, like I believe in Newton County, for example, Miss Hayes, Linda Hayes, she's the Superior Court clerk elected, but she also has magistrate court responsibilities. So here in Rockdale, for example, I don't have any magistrate court responsibilities. I only have state court responsibilities on top of my mandated job of Superior Court clerk. So some counties, you have the Superior Court clerk who is responsible for every single court in the county, and that's the way that that county chooses to do business. So just because in this county, for example, I'm the clerk of Superior and state courts, it doesn't necessarily mean that's how it goes in Newton or Walton or somewhere down any other county in Georgia. It's all contingent upon how that county chooses to do business. I'll give you an example. In DeKalb County, you have the elected clerk of Superior Court, but the state court clerk is appointed, and there's 9 state court judges in DeKalb that choose their own clerk. So it's different. So the Superior Court clerk in DeKalb, for example, has nothing to do with state court. So like I said, every county is different. So so narrowing it down, modern day operations in this office here in modern day, there are 32 staff members of the Clerk of Superior and State Courts office, which includes the elected clerk. All other members of the office are sworn deputy clerks, so they take an oath of office just like I do for this position. There are 7 divisions of this office, each of which are managed by a division manager. And the division managers are listed on this slide. If you should have any questions for any of these divisions, or as we move on, if you develop questions or if you think of questions even after this presentation and you want to give them a call, you can go to our website and simply click on phone directory, and it'll give you the information and contact information for all of these different divisions. But you'll notice as we go through these divisions, there are personnel, there are 32, like I said, and we are on all 3 floors of the Rockdale County Courthouse. Obviously, over the course of many years, the office has expanded and gotten bigger. As the population has grown, there have been many more state court cases and Superior Court cases that have been filed. So that requires a lot of people to handle the responsibilities of the office. You know, it's kind of like back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when the county was first created, there was 1 sheriff and maybe 1 deputy back then, because that's all the population required. But as time grew on, I'm sure that the sheriffs back in 1870s, early 1900s would have found it very interesting to know that here we are in 2020 and our current sheriff's office operates with almost 350 personnel. So as time moves on, obviously more people are needed to handle the responsibilities of the office. So we have the Superior State Civil Division, which is inclusive of jury management. So that's a responsibility of this office. We're the ones you get the jury summons from. We handle the master jury list for Rockdale County, and that master jury list is derived from State Department of Driver Services records. It's not necessarily just driver's licenses, but it's also derived from people who are issued ID cards by the state government. So if you have an ID card or a driver's license, that information is a part of our master jury list. Also, voter registration files is where we get our information from. So voter registrations are also combined and meshed with the Department of Driver Services files to form our master jury list. Now, we don't build the master jury list here in this office. That is done at the state level by our clerk's authority at the state government level. Before we get the master jury list, there are a slew of things that they have to go through to verify that the list is accurate. One of those things is checking death certificate records and making sure that people are taken off of the jury list when they need to be taken off. Now, I will tell you, a year or two ago, the state government made a mistake and they accidentally omitted 2 death files from the master jury list, unbeknownst to the clerks. So when we got our master jury list and we started sending out notices, we started getting bombarded with complaints because some folks were receiving jury summons for their family members who had been deceased for 5, 6, 7 years. And to us, it was a problem that was not known, but it just goes to show how much work goes into building that record and trying to keep it updated every year. Other factors are people who move out of the county, people who want to be exempt because they're over the age of 70. There's a whole slew of things that could get people removed from the list if they choose to be, or if they commit a felony. So anyway, jury management is a big responsibility of this office, and it takes a lot of time and effort to make sure that that list is correct. So that's a part of our civil division. But other things in the civil division is basically anything that is not a criminal offense. So divorce papers that are filed, people who are filing garnishments on employees or other parties to get money that they're due. You have a lawsuit over a car accident. Those are just some of the examples of things that we handle in the civil division. So we have the superior criminal division. Those are basically our felony cases. So somebody commits a murder, if we have an armed robbery, if we have a theft where it's a substantial dollar amount, those are examples of things that would be handled by the superior criminal division. So anything that goes through that court would be handled by one of 2 of our superior court judges. Our real estate division is pretty much inclusive of our superior division, but the real estate division is the custodian of all land records within Rockdale County. And they also have the responsibility of handling the notary public commissions, which falls under the Clerk of Superior Court's purview and an umbrella of responsibilities. So deeds, liens, and plats are stored in our real estate division for every property that go back to 1870, which is when the county was created. And we'll get into more detail about which records we have and which are digitized as the presentation goes on. State Court Criminal Division is basically all of your traffic offenses and any other misdemeanor offense that someone might get charged with. So if somebody damages property and is considered a misdemeanor, they might be prosecuted through state court. If you have a auto accident where someone is suing one person or another, they may go through state court. Of course, that's not a criminal, a lawsuit's not criminal action, but other criminal actions may be a misdemeanor family violence offense. That would be heard by our state court. We currently right now have 1 state court judge, Nancy Bills, but by act of the legislature, they have just created a 2nd judgeship position. That will take effect in January of 2022. So we'll have 2 state court judges operating court instead of 1, which I can tell you right now, Judge Bills does a great job of keeping her court organized, but she is definitely overloaded. So we're all very happy that the state legislature has given our circuit another judge. It's a year off, but that gives us a year to plan and prepare for it as we move forward. So number 5, Board of Equalization Division. A lot of people hear Board of Equalization, they say, what in the world is that? Well, there is a mechanism in place that when the tax assessors for a county assess the values of property, they turn that assessment over to the tax commissioner, and you're all sent a property tax bill. If you're a business owner, you're also sent a property tax bill for your business. Well, based on whatever assessment they send you, if you feel that your property has been inappropriately assessed, or if you disagree with the assessment, that is the mechanism that is put into the law that's called the Board of Equalization. So you go through a appeal process with the Board of Equalization. And back in 2012, that responsibility was divested to the Clerk of Superior Court. And you may be thinking, what does me appealing my property taxes have to do with the clerk? Well, they wanted a third party neutral entity to be over the process to allow you as a property owner to come in and have your appeal heard or your hearing heard before your peers. So essentially, it's my job as it's called appeal administrator. As Clerk of Superior Court, I'm the appeal administrator for the Board of Equalization process. And essentially, what I am responsible for is coming up with a panel of citizens that are property owners, just like all of you in the county, and having them come in and serve volunteer appointments on the Board of Equalization to hear appeals and to make decisions based on whatever it is the person is aggrieved about. So if they think that their taxes are too high or too low, they'll appeal it. There's somebody from the tax assessor's office that's also present, an employee of the county that gives their side. A decision is made from the board. If the citizen feels that the citizen or that the decision is not something they can live with, then they can appeal it to a superior court judge and leave it up to a judge to decide. But there's a mechanism in place for you to hopefully have a resolution through the Board of Equalization. In my office, I have an accounting division. A lot of people don't realize this, but there are approximately $400,000 to $500,000 that flow through my office every month. Not all of that is fines and fees. It may be court-ordered restitution, maybe cash bonds. There's a whole slew of reasons that that amount of money may flow through this office. It's my job and my accounting division's job to make sure that everything balances to the penny each month, and we make sure that funds are paid out by statute to the funds that they need to be paid to each and every month. So there may be anywhere from 60 to 70 checks that are issued by this office every month that are the responsibility of the Clerk of Superior Court. So that could be people who have paid fines, who have paid restitution, who money needs to be paid out to somebody who's due restitution. Somebody may need a refund on a cash bond issue. There's a whole slew of things that the fines and fees go to. So I'll give you an example. You get pulled over on a traffic stop and a sheriff's deputy writes you a citation for running a red light. You may be charged a fine of $150 in court, but that $150 doesn't go straight to Rockdale County government. Essentially what happens is the government's the receipt or in receipt of the $150, but by the time all of the fines and fees are broken up and divided among all of the state funds that have to be paid into, the county may end up only collecting $40 of that. Multiple fines are divided into multiple ways, and every single fine has multiple laws that are attached to it that we as the clerk's office have to send checks to each month. So that's just a little bit of history, and that's why we have our own accounting division. Now, when I say accounting division, I'm not talking about the county finance department. I'm talking about within this office, the accounting division handles those responsibilities because it's a constitutional obligation of this office to make sure that all of the monies for superior and state courts are handled in the most efficient manner. And that's what we do. And then finally, I have a court technology division. As you all know, technology is pretty much driving everything we do these days, from our smartphones to our home computers. We're on Zoom right now, as a matter of fact. There's a whole slew of things that the courts use technology for. So I have two representatives that pretty much handle all technology needs, not only for the staff here, all 32 staff, but they also handle the technology needs for any customers that are interacting with our office that are having problems accessing information. That's what they do as well. So those 7 divisions serve the community in their own individual capacities, and they are the backbone of this office, and they keep things going each and every day. So I want to get into some of the questions, or actually all of the questions that you all submitted to me. And I listed these out, so they may not necessarily be in the order that was presented to me, because some of the numbers that was presented to me had 2 or 3 questions associated. So ultimately, by the end, I think there's 14 questions that I will have addressed. And at the end, if there's additional questions, I'm happy to go over those as well. So first and foremost, number 1, the question was, will you have a handout that we can print? Yes. The handout is this PowerPoint. So this PowerPoint was converted into PDF format, and it was provided by email to your club president, and he should be sending that out to everyone on your distribution list. Number 2, are all of these records listed in genealogy gems? Full disclosure here, I wasn't familiar with what genealogy gems was prior to preparing for this presentation. I did a little Google research and I read about it. We do not openly supply information from this office to entities such as genealogy gems. They are welcome to do their research, and if they find the information, put it on their site. But we operate under what's called Superior Court rules here in Georgia. And the reason that the Superior Court rule is in effect basically states that we are able to keep our office open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's what the state law says. And anyone who wants to do research on our records can come and do research free of charge if they choose to do so in our office. But based on Superior Court rules, we don't supply information to outside entities. If we did, then there would be hundreds of requests every week, and we would have no time to run the office. We would be constantly filling requests for people that need information. So that's why the law is written to where if anyone wants to do research on any of our files, as long as it's not a sealed case by court order, you can come in and search for it. But I'll get into more detail about what's available and what's not as this continues on. But full disclosure, I didn't know anything about genealogy gems until preparing for this presentation, and I learned something new by looking into it. So I appreciate that for whoever asked that question. So number 3, can you go over the procedure to access older records, and if you have, or if they have indexes? So the majority of state court and superior court criminal and civil records are searchable by automated means, but right now you have to use a kiosk workstation within our office. So in our real estate division, which is in room 101 of the courthouse, I've got 6 computers that are public workstations where people can come in and search for records. You could either search for civil or criminal records or real estate records in the office. Now, I do have a project that is currently in motion to have these records accessible online. I know some other counties do that. We are operating based on funding restrictions, and when funding has become available, there has been some some records that we have been able to put online, but it is our goal to have every record going back to 1870 in an accessible format online. So we're working on that. I'll go into some detail as the presentation moves on related to other records that are accessible in an online format. We'll get to that here shortly. But historical land records now from 1871 to 1973, they're searchable only by coming into the office. The land records from 1871 to 1973, you actually have to go through books and search in the book to find those land records. And we do have indexes available for those particular records. I have three representatives that work in our real estate division, and they're always getting compliments sent to me from citizens in the community when they come in, and our representatives are always helpful and guiding them to find the information that they're looking for, showing them the indexes, showing them the books that they need to look in. We've started the process a few years back, and actually it was the previous clerk that started this process of digitizing and basically preserving our oldest deed books. Those are the ones from 1871 on. It costs a lot of money to do one book. Digitization and preserving one deed book is anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. But we took our oldest books and we did that. So basically, as funding is available, we have been doing it in increments. We have about 3 or 4 of our deed books from back in the late 1800s, early 1900s that have been preserved and digitized. I submitted a capital request in our budget this year for next year, just to kind of give you an indication as to how much this costs to digitize and preserve every single record, land record, just land records that we have going back to 1870. For those that have not been digitized yet, will cost upwards of $350,000. So I submitted the capital request. Capital comes out of our SPLOS funds. It's up to the Board of Commissioners whether or not it gets approved. Obviously, every single county department and every single elected office is clamoring for funds out of the SPLOS. So, there's a lot of things that, the county needs to fund out of the SPLOS account, and I recognize that. Fire trucks, police cars, new buildings, I get it. But, if you don't ask, then you never get a response. So I at least submitted the request, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to have all of those records digitized sometime soon. And we can talk more about that as the presentation goes on. So there are, like I said a minute ago, some records that are available online already. And if you go to our website, which is listed here, www.rockdaleclerk.com, you can access deed and lien records from 1974 to the present time. Now, when you go to our website and you click on, it actually says, it actually says online land records. You'll notice that the useful links that are here at the bottom, these useful links, they say record search, view only, record search, view and print with subscription fee, and then historical deed and plat indexes. So what you will do is you'll select real estate land records found under the clerk's tab. There'll be 2 blue record search links, which is what you see down at the bottom of the screen. The first link only allows you to view deed and lien documents dating from 1976 to the present day, as well as plat records from 2002 to present. The second link that you see where it says view and print with subscription fee allows you to view and print with the subscription fee. Those date ranges for the second link are the deeds are from 1990 to current, the liens are 2003 to current, the plats are from November of 2003 to current. Now, below the 2 record search links, there are historical and deed plat indexes link. This link allows for deeds from 74 to 75 to be viewed, as well as plats from 1947 to 2002. Now, Rockdale County real estate records are not available through Google Books. That was one of the questions also earlier. Now, I just threw a bunch of dates at you. There's no way that you could possibly be expected to remember all of those dates. The reason those are all jumbled up and it's so confusing, this thing's deeds are only from 1990 to current. Liens are only 2003 to current. Plats are only November of 2003 to current. I know that's very confusing. that's an example of what previous clerks have done when funding was available to make things digitized and available online, because it costs so much money. You have to take these huge, heavy books. They have to have white glove service, which basically means they have to be taken to a proper facility, and each and every page has to be scanned and then archived and then put into a searchable format, which costs a lot of money to accomplish. So that's why it's broken up the way it is. That's why when I submitted the request in my capital this year, I wanted to have every single record available and searchable online for our deeds, liens, and plats, and also for our civil and criminal records. Civil and criminal pretty much are already available. I'll explain more about that here shortly in a searchable format in the office, but I wanted to basically have every deed, lien, and plat available in a searchable format on our website. Which is why it costs so much money, because I wanted to get away from all of these different time frames that are available on our site. So as time goes on, if we don't get our capital request this year, I know some people have told me in the past there are grants available, but unfortunately those grants only cover about at the most between $3,000 and $5,000. When you're talking about a project that overall costs $350,000, you know, $3,000 to $5,000 is only pennies compared to what dollar amount is actually needed to get all of those stored. So the county does recognize, when I submitted my budget request, they do recognize the value in having all of these archived, not only for convenience purposes, but for disaster recovery purposes. We all know that we can't control Mother Nature, and we may have, God forbid, a tornado or some other kind of natural disaster that happens where these records would be destroyed potentially. And if we have them all digitized and scanned and searchable, then we still have access to them. But if we don't, then they're gone forever. Knock on wood, and I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we, state and superior court, have not lost any records due to any kind of disaster that I'm aware of. Now, I only can go back to 1985 when Ms. Caldwell was the clerk. She's somebody that I talk to on a regular basis, and she has told me out of her own mouth that we haven't lost any records due to any kind of natural disaster or any kind of accidental destruction. And Miss Caldwell obviously knew the clerk before her, who was Jeanette Farmer, and Miss Farmer was the clerk going all the way back to the mid-60s. And she too did not ever hear Miss Farmer talk about any kind of records that were ever accidentally destroyed or damaged by a natural disaster. So we at least are good until the mid-60s. Now, before that, I obviously can't speak to that because I wasn't around back then, and we don't know what may have happened that may have never got passed on to the incoming clerk. But as good as I can tell, based on everything that I see in the office, we have records going all the way back to 1871, which is 2 to 3 months after the county was first created. So I would venture to say we have everything. It's just whether or not it's in a proper searchable format is another story. So the Superior Court criminal records that we have from 1990 to present are searchable using a kiosk workstation within the office. 1989 and older for Superior Court Criminal Division are only searchable by using the docket books. That's another example of additional books that we would eventually like to get scanned and digitized. Pretty much the only time we are asked for information right now for criminal records in Superior Court for 1989 or older are those that are applying for weapons carry licenses through probate. Probate court may get a criminal history that says somebody was charged with a felony back in 1975 here in Rockdale County, and there's no disposition on the criminal history. So they may come to us and they may ask us for disposition records. Well, we have to go pull boxes and paper files to get the disposition of cases that were that old. Hopefully one day we'll have those digitized, but for the bulk of our cases from 1990 to present, we have a searchable format in a computer here in the office. And the public can use these public access terminals also to search for records from 1990 to present for Superior Court criminal cases. So the next question that I got was, over the years, have any of the county records been lost, damaged, or destroyed? And I just hit on that just a minute ago. This presentation can only speak to the records held or maintained by the Clerk of Superior and State Courts. As for this office, no records have been lost, damaged, or destroyed to the best of our knowledge. And I just kind of gave you some background as to how I came to that conclusion. Now, footnote here, the land records project that I submitted in our capital budget request this year, we'll see what happens. Like I said, when you're talking about asking for a little piece of the pie for the SPLOS funds, you have every single county department and every elected office that are clamoring for whatever SPLOS funds are available for that particular year. So we'll just have to wait and see. Like I said, you never know until you ask. So that's why it was submitted this year. Next question. What are some unique holdings managed by the Clerk of Superior Court? I'm really glad that you asked this question, whoever it was. First bullet, we have the original plat for the very first Rockdale County Courthouse dated May 14th, 1877. This was hand-drawn on a piece of notebook paper, which we found to be amazing. The original plat was drawn in 1877. So even though the county was created by active legislature in October of 1870, things didn't really start getting moving until 1871. And then from 1871 to 1877, I don't know how they operated. They may have just operated out of someone's house, or maybe a building here close to the railroad tracks. But the first official courthouse, the plat was not drawn until 1877. And it was in the same location where we are right now, up at the corner of Milstead and Main. That was the post office. The courthouse was actually at the corner of Court Street and Main Street. I'm sorry, Court Street and Main Street. And the original courthouse that was built burned down sometime after. They built another courthouse that was eventually torn down, and then the courthouse in 1939 was built at its current location at the corner of Court Street and Main Street. But the plat that we have was from the original courthouse from 1877, which is pretty cool. Next bullet. So some other interesting, unique holdings that we have criminal case records going all the way back to 1871. So original warrants with people's names, with their locations. Now, you got to keep in mind, locations of crimes back then were a lot different than they are now. Now you have an actual street address that is written on the warrant for the location of the crime. Back then, it may have just said Route 1, Conyers, Georgia. Or it may have just said, Main Street, Conyers, Georgia. Some of the charges that are really cool that we sifted through in our boxes, we found where someone had a debt of $5.40 and they were brought to court in 1874 to pay their debt or to at least answer to the charge. In 1885, we found documentation where someone owed rent of $54.75. In 1903, we found where someone was charged with gambling. Again, in 1903, we found where someone was charged with possession of whiskey. In 1904, we found a charge of freight riding, probably associated something to do with the train system. 1908, we found where someone was charged with stealing bushels of corn. So when you look at these actual warrants, obviously back then they wrote in cursive. The cursive handwriting sometimes is very difficult to read, but you can unfold these pieces of paper and actually see what people were charged with back then. Now, some of this documentation doesn't have dispositions. It doesn't have information about where the person lived. Back then when the county population was, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people, it may have just had the person's name. And if the sheriff at the time knew the person's name, there was no further identifying information, no height, weight, there was no date of birth, there was no, you may only have just a name listed. But it's really interesting to take some of these old boxes and go through some of these old charges just to see what people went through back then in terms of charges. Another interesting, unique holding that we have would be we have jury checkbooks in the registry of the checks dating all the way back to 1880. So I can tell you which jurors received a check from the court system for serving as a juror back in the late 1800s. Back then, they got $1, or in some cases, maybe $2 for serving on the jury back then. So that's another interesting holding that we have here in the court system. But we have records. The Clerk of Superior Court, like I said, Superior Court used to be the only court in the county that handled charges back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So we have court records going all the way back. Now, we don't have all of those records in an organized chronological manner. The oldest records, that's something that is still yet to be done. Every year, those records just get handed off to the next clerk. And because we have so much going on in modern day, there hasn't actually been a clerk that has had the time to actually go through and put things into chronological order. But we do still have all of the records. It's just the fact that there's so much. It's interesting right now just to sift through the boxes and see what was there and what happened back then. But hopefully one day we'll be at a point to where we can get those organized. And who knows, there might be some family members out there that know their family history, some of you even, that go all the way back to when the county was created. And you might find some interesting things where maybe one of your family members served as a grand juror on a case, or maybe some of your family members were actually possibly even charged with a crime. Who knows? So the next question: does the county make available non-identifying birth background information for those who have been adopted, or for those who have family members that have been adopted? The answer is no. All adoption records in the state of Georgia are sealed by the court. So contents of adoption records are only available by court order. If somebody comes up here and says, "Hey, I know that I was adopted 30 years ago, and my mother just passed away, and she never told me anything about my adoption, and I found out that I was adopted, so I want some information." Well, we can't give them anything. We can't even confirm that a record exists. If the person goes through an attorney, or if they file their own documentation with the courts to have that record unsealed, and the court order states that we can open the record and give information out, then we will. But it requires a judge to issue a court order to open that record. Adoptions are very strict. We don't even put adoptions into the computer system. Everything is maintained in a docket book, and then all of the files are maintained in fireproof file cabinets and also locked into a vault. So very serious information as it relates to adoptions. We're bound by law, and that's where we'll get into the actual law here shortly. But what information is listed on an adoption record? Birth, birthplace, birth parents, adoption parents, siblings, grandparents. So the clerk's office holds the original record to include all documents filed in support of the petition for adoption. The clerk also maintains a docket book, which is what I just mentioned, of the records for the adoptive child or children, the petitioners, the attorney if applicable. Some people don't go through an attorney, but it's highly recommended that you do, or else it's a big mess. The date filed and the case number. Updates are added to the documents that are filed all the way until the closure of the case. The certificate of adoption, the form 3927, is completed by the attorney or the filing party, whoever, once the final decree of adoption is filed. This form contains the information about the child before the adoption, and it also includes the names, the place of birth, the date of birth for the adoptive parents, and the new name of the child if the name is changed, the date of the decree, and the court information. It's signed and it's sealed by the clerk, and it's filed with the State Office of Vital Records. This is how the birth certificate is issued. So you all may be able to search family trees and go through vital records for birth certificates, but in terms of any of the adoption data, you don't have access to that, and the only way you could is by court order. When do adoption records become available to the public? For example, the 1950 U.S. Census becomes available to the public in 2022, which is 72 years. The best thing I can do in reference to this is to show you what the actual law states. And OCGA 19823 is what I have copied and pasted into this slide. I won't go through and read it all because I'm sure y'all are getting tired of hearing me talk right now. But this is what the actual law states. And if you'll look at such as the very bottom, I'll skip ahead. All of such court records, including the docket book that relate to in any manner to the adoption, shall be kept sealed and locked. So like I said, anybody who comes into this office and asks any questions, they may tell me, hey, I know Jane Doe for a fact was adopted on July 1st, 1980, and I just want to know, was her dad's name Richard? We can't tell them anything. We've got the files here, we've got the information, but we cannot release 1 ounce of information out of that record because it's sealed. The only way we can is if a judge signs a court order telling us what we can do. If they file a court order, then yes, we can do it. But other than that, that record stays sealed forever. It never becomes available again unless a court order is signed. Next question. Do divorce records list the full name and maiden name of the parents and names of the children related by birth? Are stepchildren listed as well? So there was quite a bit of information that I could say in reference to this question, but I tried to condense it all into one slide. And this is where I've said divorce petitions may very well include the full name, maiden name, and should include mention of any children of the marriage, the names and the dates of birth. Stepchildren are sometimes mentioned, but not necessarily mandatory. Every family makeup is different. That's why it's not necessarily mandatory for the stepchildren. But the official record of divorce is the form 3907, and that's the report of divorce, which is filed after the final decree. So the final decree is what the Superior Court judge lists as the final order granting the divorce, and it gives any kind of criteria or rules or guidelines to go by based on the divorce, like who may get custody of the kids, how much alimony has to be paid, how much child support has to be paid, what property is divided up. Those are examples of things that would be in the final decree. So this form is first filed in the clerk's office along with the final disposition at the closure of the case. The clerk's office, upon completion, then forwards to the State of Office of Vital Records. So once we have the final decree, we file this form with the State Office of Vital Records. Form 3907 includes information such as the date that the divorce was decreed, the party names, the names at birth, actually, the county of residence, the number of marriages that the person may have had in the past, number of children under the age of 18 that are affected by this decree, and the grounds for the divorce. So that's the information that we have, and that's what we receive. So pretty much any minor children under the age of 18 that are affiliated with this divorce, that are the biological children of both parties, that are not, or they could be adopted. I'm sorry, not just biological, but they're the legal guardian of the kids, and they're affected by the divorce. They are listed, but stepchildren aren't necessarily a part of the filing. So when do divorce records become available to the public? Are they sealed until then? Divorce records are made available to the public as soon as they're filed. So if you know of somebody that came into our office and filed for divorce a week ago, you could come in and use one of our public kiosks and search and be able to see the record. The only exception is if they filed the request or if they filed the petition and asked for it to be sealed. Otherwise, nothing is sealed in a divorce case unless a judge issues a court order stating that it needs to be sealed from the beginning. So divorce records are always open and available and searchable. They're considered open access and not sealed should you want to come in and search those records. Next question. Are plat records digitized? Essentially, the answer is no. Only plats filed from 1947 to present have been digitized. Plats filed prior to 1947 were recorded with the land records in the deed books. These images will be included in future land records project that I just spoke of. So around about 1947, the clerks from 1947 on into the past filed everything into the deed books along with the deeds. 1947 and after, they started having separate plat books, probably about the time that the county started actually getting more and more populated. They changed things up. So if my land record project goes through, then yes, they'll be digitized and you can view them online going all the way back to 1871. But at this point, that is the official response. So next question, are military discharge records indexed and available to the public? What years do they cover? So Rockdale County military discharge records date back to 1918, only because that's when our first record was that we started actually receiving discharge records. So from 1918 back to 1870, we may not have too much that are on file, but we definitely have information going back to 1918. Military discharge records are exempt from the Open Records Act for a period of 50 years from their filing. So in that 50-year time span, the only people who can get those are those that are listed below. So upon the proper identification, you come into the office, you show us proper ID, the following people can examine and obtain a copy of or a certified copy of the record free of charge. Now, this is if it's within the 50-year mark. If it's before the 50-year mark, then anybody could come in and search the record. But if it's within the 50 years, the person who is the subject of the record can come in, the spouse or the next of kin can come in, a person named in an appropriate power of attorney can come in, the administrator, executor of a will, the guardian or legal representative of the person can get a copy of the discharge record. An attorney for the person who is the subject of the record can come in. Those are all examples of people who can get access to the record within that 50-year time frame. Now, some people say, why do I need to file my DD-214 in the clerk's office? It doesn't make any sense to me. I've got it in my lockbox at home. Well, some people have unfortunately had fire or disaster at their house. Some people just lose it and don't know where it is. Some people have parents that pass away and they don't tell their kids prior to their death, they don't tell their kids where their vital paperwork is stored or located. We always recommend that people come in and file their DD-214 in our office because it gives a safe and secure location where you can always come and get a copy of it. So if you have a family member that has passed away and you're just thinking to yourself, oh, Lord, I don't want to go through Veterans Affairs. I don't want to go through, I don't know where to find this discharge paperwork. You can go through the Clerk of Superior Court and the reference county and see if they have the file, see if they have it on file. If they do and you're next of kin, then you can get a copy of it if it's within 50 years. If it's more than 50 years, you can still get a copy of it. A friend of mine that I'm in Kiwanis with, I was telling him about this last year, and he said, I sure would like to know about my great-grandfather. Think you could find me his DD-214? And I said, sure. I said, I'll take a look. Well, sure enough, I found his DD-214 filed in the early 1900s in this office. Obviously, the early 1900s is well beyond the 50 years, so I just made a copy of it and brought it to him. But it was really interesting to see discharge paperwork filed from that long ago, especially for somebody that had a direct affiliation with someone. I had not actually seen that up until that point. So, but yes, we do have those records here. And like I said, it's filed free of charge. That's actually written into the law that it's filed, and that the copies are provided free of charge as well to those that qualify, of course. Next question. How accurate is the information provided by an accused individual? So we're kind of segueing from DD-214s into criminal cases again. So personal information is provided by the accused at the time of the arrest. It is the responsibility of the accused to update the district attorney's office and the courts when changes occur. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll just go ahead and tell you, speaking from a law enforcement perspective, which you heard in my bio is what I used to be, and the clerk of court record now, the standpoint, we only have information that is as good as what's provided to us. From a law enforcement standpoint, out on the side of the road, when someone is arrested and charged with a crime and they're taken to jail, they may provide an address then, but then by the time it goes through 8 months in the court system and it finally goes to adjudication, the person has moved 3 or 4 times since the date of the arrest over 8 months ago. So where you may have the same residence for 40 years plus, other people don't operate that way. And they frequently, either by choice, change residences, or not by choice, and it's because they've been evicted or asked to move out of a family member's home, or whatever the case may be. Their circumstances just completely change. And while we hope that they keep the courts updated, that doesn't necessarily always happen that way. So unfortunately, we're at the what's the word I'm looking for? We have to depend on the accused to provide us with accurate information and keep us updated. Now, when our DA's office or when our courts process cases, I've heard the DA's office and I've also heard our judges asking the accused, sir, you're about to be put on probation. Just confirm you still live at 123 Main Street, and the person will confirm or deny. And we do try to keep the information updated in as much as possible. So there is effort being made by every office through the process. But, you know, if we have a crime that's committed out in the community and it's somebody who committed a crime 5 years ago, chances are that person is not at the same address that they were 5 years ago. And that's because the case was closed 5 years ago, and, you know, people move on a regular basis. And especially all of the information that are from past court cases, it's very possible that that information is old information as well. So, okay, so if an individual clears their name of a misdemeanor charge, what happens to the original case, and how is it annotated to reflect the dismissed charge? So the original case is listed as disposed in our case management system. Upon receipt and proper documentation from the district attorney's office is supplied to the clerk's office to support that disposed status. This may happen prior to being accused or charges have been accused. So prior to equals no accusation drawn. If it occurred after, that would be a null pros. So essentially what happens is if somebody's charged with a misdemeanor, a crime, and the charge is just pending for weeks or a few months, and the DA's office for whatever reason decides that they're not going to present it for accusation, they're not going to present an actual accusation, they will draw up a document that is called no accusation drawn, which is a NAD. And there could be various reasons why they won't prosecute. Perhaps the DA's office has their own investigators, and perhaps through their investigation, the police officer at the time may have had probable cause to take the charge, but as the investigation has continued after the charge was made, maybe some of the witnesses changed their version of the story, or maybe some other circumstance changed the circumstances of the case to where they don't have enough evidence now to support the charge. So that's where a no accusation drawn would be presented. And then if, let's say that the charge does go through in another situation and the person actually goes to court and the final disposition is submitted as null pros, that basically means that the charge is canceled. So they weren't convicted of it, it's just null pros, which means that the judge made the decision to dismiss the charge. That's where it happens when it actually gets to the court system. So the criminal history record information on the state system is updated, and it is restricted from dissemination if it's null pros or if there is a NAD drawn. So either way, when the person is charged with the crime, they go to jail. A criminal history is reflected for the person showing the charge. Well, if the charge either gets no accusation drawn or if the charge gets null pros, essentially what happens is when that record is updated by the court system from 2013 to present, it's restricted and it's not viewable. Now, if this person, the law changed in 2013, that's why it's automatically done now. But if you know of somebody that was charged with a misdemeanor offense previous to 2013, they have to petition the court to have their record restricted. And you have to go through the arresting agency. You have to show documentation that, yes, you were in fact charged, but here's your court paperwork reflecting where the arrest did not go through for whatever reason. You were not convicted. And then you can have that removed from your criminal history through the record restriction process. The old terminology is expungement, but Georgia law does not recognize the word expungement anymore. It's now called record restriction. So any arrest prior to 2013 in the state of Georgia, just in the state of Georgia, I'm not talking about other states, just in the state of Georgia, that did not result in a conviction, you can petition to have the court restrict the record, which basically means it would not be viewable to anybody, any criminal history, any for employment purposes, for housing purposes, things along those lines, if the record restriction is granted by the court. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, and I'll go into more detail here, it's anticipated before the end of calendar year 2020, this year, a new search feature will be offered on the clerk's website. Enhanced search options will become available for Superior Court and State Court records from present day, dating back to the 1990s. I ask that you stay tuned for more information on this because we're working with our software vendor now to add enhanced features, enhanced search features to our website before the end of the year. That's the overarching goal. A lot of things are in motion right now, especially with our e-filing that we've been able to accomplish this year. which we're very proud of. That's where my court technology division comes into play because there are so many moving parts in this office that it requires a lot of hands participating to keep things updated and available on our site. So we do recognize the need to have additional records searchable in an online format, especially since COVID started. We definitely recognize that need. So we were off to a very good start even before COVID, and we are continuously moving in that direction to offer more and more on our website in as much as possible. Now, as it currently stands, there's some things that we cannot put online. Things relating to juveniles, which our office doesn't handle anything relating to juvenile court anyway. And then some cases that may be sealed might be of an explicit sexual nature or involving a child where a crime was committed against a child, such as child molestation. Those type of cases would not be searchable because they involve explicit sexual nature or juvenile victims. But pretty much every other thing is pretty much searchable, at least the basic information until a case becomes adjudicated. And then we're at the final slide, which gives my contact information, which all of you will have in your possession as we move forward. So as it stands, that is that's my presentation. So I will stop the sharing and open myself up to questions from anyone. Ms. Harney.
Jamie, what's the disposition or the status of the old tax records?
Okay. Are you talking about like tax digest?
They were the old tax record, and they were in Tisa Washington's office.
Okay, so I don't know where Miss Washington has those stored. I can tell you that the tax digest files would be stored by the tax commissioner, and the tax commissioner would be able to report on those. Each individual office has their records, which I know that you all are aware that each one of our buildings are we're at max capacity in terms of storage space and space for humans to work. I don't know if Miss Washington has those stored over in her office off of Pine Street, or we also have an off-site storage facility. But Miss Washington would be able to speak to those records. They're not housed by the clerk's office.
I was just wondering if they're available to the public now.
And again, Miss Washington would be able to tell you.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Blakesley.
Okay, you were talking about some older files that your office can't get to. Is there any way, I know we were helping the probate office, is there any way you would accept help from our society to help organize and make them so that you can get them digitized?
Absolutely. I read on your website where you would help the probate and got their records organized back when Judge Brown was here. She's a very good friend of mine, and I respect her immensely. But yes, now keep in mind, I'm only the clerk until December 31st. There'll be a new clerk that's coming in on January 1st. It's my plan to still work in the office as her chief deputy when she comes in. And as far as I'm concerned, that should be no problem. It seems like anybody that's in my position would welcome assistance from volunteers. Most of the records that I mentioned that are just in boxes that are not in chronological order are over at our Parker Road facility, which is a secure, locked storage building. It is controlled by AC and heat, so if it's in the middle of winter, or if it's in the, middle of summer, there would be AC or heat over at that building for anybody that wanted to participate. But if you are interested in doing that in the future, I can certainly pass that on to the incoming clerk. I highly doubt that she will have any problem with volunteers coming in and providing that assistance. If anything, you would be making it a whole lot easier for scanning and digitization moving down the road. So most certainly, absolutely.
Thank you, and thank you for looking at our website.
Absolutely.
Because I
Absolutely.
handle the website, so that's kind of nice to know that you looked at it.
Oh yeah, I read through the entire website to better
Okay.
educate myself about your club.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Are we good to go, folks? Everything good?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. This was so informative.
It was. Thank you for all your preparation.
Complex, it's courts.
And thank you for the PDF.
Of course.
Yeah, I did.
That's perfect.
I wanted to also say thank you for your preparation. It's clear that you put a lot of time and effort into that, and we appreciate it.
That's no problem at all. And if at any point any of you have any questions in the future, tomorrow, next week, a month from now, you've got my contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm glad to help.
What is the new clerk's name that's coming in?
Her name is Janice Morris, and she will start on January 1st for a 4-year term.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
With that, we'll conclude, and thank you everyone for being here. And Mr. Cabe, once again, thank you very much for your
No
presentation.
problem.
All right, bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.